The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, music, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Dr. Lester Young, former superintendent of Community School District number 13, one of the best superintendents in the history of this city. Lester, how you like that for an introduction?
Oh, listen, thank you. You're more than gracious. Your kind words are really appreciated.
Well, many of us worked with you in District 13 and also when you went to the Chancellor's office. And you do have a very broad view of urban education. Mm-hmm. So to start out talk today, let's talk about what the main issues are that face urban schools throughout the nation before we come to New York City particularly.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me begin by putting it in a context. Nationally, what everyone seems to talk about is the disparity within student achievement, the difference between white student achievement, black and Hispanic student achievement. And that comes to us by way of something called the achievement gap. I believe one of the real challenges is the achievement gap is critical. I think the real issue, though, is access to opportunity, the opportunity gap, the access gap that exists between and among the races.
That probably is something that's been with us since slavery and the Civil War. Mm-hmm. Opportunities have always been diminished for people of color, and even now in 2006, where we have all these civil rights laws and so on, opportunities are still less. So could you focus a little on how do those opportunities get to be less? What causes those opportunities to be less?
Well, the first and most and foremost is it's been well established by research and experience that within the black community, we have the least experienced, least skilled, least educated teachers. And so we, out of the box, we're behind. If young people of greatest need have the least experienced teachers, the least educated teachers, the least skilled teachers, how can they receive the benefit of a quality education? So it seems to me that access to a quality teacher is paramount if we're ever to move the education agenda in this city or nationally.
But nationally, the number of black teachers has diminished. At one time it was about 13%, and that really is a result of the civil rights movement, where in the South, when school integration came, they fired the black teachers. Black teachers, at least historically, were considered to be the pillar of the black community and helping people to move on. And the main reason that black students in the South were not achieving wasn't so much they didn't have dedicated, qualified teachers, but they didn't have the resources. And that sometimes the teachers didn't have the resources to get educated. That has somewhat changed now. The resource allocation is somewhat equal, not exactly, because we have the New York City campaign for fiscal equity, where New York City has 38% of the students and gets 34% of the money. But still, there's been some leveling of that. So why is it that the least qualified teachers end up in urban schools that are predominantly minority?
Well, I mean, your point of the issue of resource distribution obviously is well taken, but if you really examine that closely, what we know is, in addition to poor teachers, the districts where our young people attend school spend less per student than the white districts.
Why?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. In New York City, the allocation is based on average teacher salary. And so it just stands to reason that the teachers get paid based on their years of experience and their education. And so if your teachers have less experience and they have less education, they start out receiving less money. Well, here's what happens. Those districts get less money. When I was a superintendent, the truth was we had as many students as some other districts that I won't name, but here's the thing. We received less money because our teachers were less experienced. and they weren't hired at that higher pay scale. So teacher experience and resource allocation is extremely important. The other issue around resource and budget is the whole notion of equity. We really haven't, while we have this campaign for fiscal equity, and they talk about New York City should receive a greater share of the allocation, the question that I raise is, how do we ensure that the communities of Harlem, Brownsville, Bedford-Stuyvesant, the South Bronx, South Jamaica, how do we ensure that those districts of greatest need in New York City, receive a greater share of that allocation, since those young people have greater need?
Of course, this goes to the core of the problem. Does the larger society really want minority children to get the same quality education as majority children? It's a class issue, it's an income issue. What's your opinion about that? Is there really that commitment in society?
I think if we're having a conversation over tea, everyone says, yes, we want to have quality education for everyone. I think that when it comes down to resource distribution, and if it means that I have to give something up in order to help you, then the answer is absolutely not. We're not giving up anything. And I think that is an issue. That's a policy issue that we've got to come to grips with. That's an issue that our elected officials have to come to grips with. That's a difficult one because everyone says, well, yeah, we want you to get what you need, but not at my expense. And so we've got to come to grips with what is the greater principle. Do we really believe in equity, or are we prepared to have two systems?
When you talk about the gap in achievement between minority and majority group kids, it's usually reflected in tests. Now, standardized tests, whatever kind of test. Does that mean that the students are not being given the opportunity to learn the material, or does that mean they can't learn it, or that the material is being presented in a way that they can't benefit from it?
Well, I think there are a few things. Again, I go back to the quality of instruction. I believe that one of the reasons why young people in New York City, particularly on Regents examination, don't do as well in some communities as in others is because they don't have skilled teachers. See, here's what happens. If a youngster has to take a biology Regents and the teacher who's teaching biology isn't certified in biology, then that youngster is at a disadvantage, is at an inherent disadvantage. And so we've got to fix that. We've got to figure out how do we ensure that our young people receive the same quality as youngsters across the state, across the city. The other way to think about it is upstate New York, the average high school class size is 15. And so you've got youngsters taking chemistry and biology and other science courses and history and literature, and they're in classes of 15. You come to New York City, the average large high school, you could have as many as 40 young people in the class. So I think, again, we've got to take a real hard look at what are we prepared to stand for. You know, recently I've been teaching. I teach a graduate course, aspiring administrators. And one of the questions that I pose to them is, what is it about our thinking that allows us to allow these conditions to exist? What is it about our thinking that makes that happen? And I think we've got to begin to challenge the system to say that if we're really serious about ensuring the inherent right that our Constitution guarantees for all young people, then we've got to get more serious about the issues of equity.
Well, the issues of equity came forward in the campaign for fiscal equity suit, and you point out that when that 1.5 or $3.5 billion comes back to the city, it's a question of how it can best be allocated. There's one group of folks that says that it should be spent mainly on reducing class size. What do you think about that?
Well, I think class size is important, but I think in and of itself, it's not going to make a big difference.
Why?
I believe that the key is not what you do to the schools, what you do in the school. It's what happens in the classroom. I've seen large classes where young people do very well. It's the quality of the instruction, which not only includes the background of the teacher, it also speaks to the relationship. When you talked about the black teachers of the South, I mean, one of the key points was that they had a relationship not only with those students, but with that community. I mean, the community and the school, they had a single vision. See, that's powerful. When you have the people in the school and the people outside of school have the same vision for the children, then it's easier to accomplish. But when you have a situation where you have people in the school with one vision and the people in the community with another, and the people in the school don't have the confidence or respect in the community to advance a collaboration, you never achieve the goals that we say we want for all young people.
Yet there is research that indicates that some urban schools and school systems do better in reducing the gap and advancing young people. Now, it could be triage. It could be that he put all the the resources in one part of the community. But what, in your experience and knowing the literature, do you think are the key things, other than the fact that they need respect in relationship to the community, that will help an urban school to be good?
Well, I think the first and foremost, you have to have a strong leader. I'm convinced that I've visited schools all across the country, and you've seen schools with great teachers, but if they don't have a strong leader, particularly when you're talking about serving communities of greatest need. Now, when you're talking about communities where they have the resources, that may be that what I'm saying may not be totally accurate. But in communities where you of greatest need, you have to begin with a strong leader.
What are the characteristics of a strong leader?
Well, you have to have a leader who, number one, knows the young people in that community and how they learn. You have to have a leader who has a focus on learning. A focus on learning. You have to have a leader who is a professional, who knows their business, knows the business of education. You have to have a leader who understands what it means to run a school. You have to have a leader who's grounded in what I call development, how young people learn. You have to know that stuff.
Well, you talked about knowing how to run a school. You have all kinds of problems in school. You have lunch, you have discipline, you have cell phones, you have complaining parents, you have complaining teachers. How does a principal bring all of that together to move the school along?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The school is a complex institution, and as such, there's no substitute for experience. So I believe that in addition to being smart people, school principals have to be experienced.
Do you think they have to have been teachers, or can they come from a corporation with good management skills and just run the school?
Well, the answer to that is absolutely not. I think that there are probably exceptions to every rule, and we all know that. But barring those exceptions, I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that everyone can run a school. That's just like saying that, well, because I can read, I can teach reading. I mean, we know that that's not necessarily the case. And I think something that is as important as the education of our young people, and if we understand the connection between a bad education and what happens after, a bad education and ending up in prison, a bad education and not being able to support your family, not being able to get a job, we have to change our view. Everyone can't take that on. However, there is this notion that and I understand what's seductive about this idea is that everyone says, well, this has been left up to educators for all this time, and look at the miserable job you've done. So now we're going to bring in a new approach. And everyone embraces this new approach. But here's what I say. Let's look at the outcomes. The question is, are the schools any better now? I mean, that's a real question,
the key question
that we need to answer. We need to look very carefully at. Is the dropout rate for young people of color, primarily students of African descent and Hispanics, is it any better? What's happening with our male students right now? And why can't we grapple with that issue? So the question to me is not just, are the fourth grade scores any better? The real question is, are schools better? Are our young people doing any better as a result of the current reform?
And of course, when they talk about fourth grade scores being better, that means the kids got 2 more questions right on the exam out of a 50-question exam.
And it also means that all the youngsters that couldn't read at a certain level never got to the fourth grade. They were held over. So part of what we've got to look at is, yes, what does it actually mean when people say the scores are better? See, what I say is what we really need to look at is what are we trying to accomplish with the New York City public school system?
Well, to be fair, though, we do want kids who can read a sentence and understand
Absolutely.
it. You want kids who can multiply, divide, add, and make a projection and read a statistical map. So we want those skills. I guess the question is, how do we get there, given the fact that there's so many other factors that make it difficult, the large class size, the disruption in the community, a whole range of things. Well, I'm inclined to think that a lot of those can be handled by a good leader.
Well, here, I think you're right. I think a lot can be handled by a good leader. I also think that our progress as a people historically has come about through deliberate efforts designed to ensure that we benefited. And I think we've got to be very careful. Everyone is not failing in New York City public schools or in urban schools across the country. This problem that we have is a problem that is evident only among people of color, primarily Black and Hispanic. And so we've got to examine that and say, well, does this concept of goal that we want for all young people, does that benefit us? Or should we advocate for goals that target our young people? If we want more Black males to do better, if we want more Black males to, when they exit high school, to be able to attend the City College of New York, then we need to have a program designed to do that. You can't say, well, we're going to do this for everyone and expect that that approach is going to reach the diversity of a city as large as New York. It just doesn't happen. We need to have differential access to programs and resources to ensure that our young people will benefit from education.
And clearly at the City University of New York, we're trying to do this. There is the Black Male Initiative that Chancellor Goldstein and President Edison Jackson from Medgar Evers are developing. Right. The problem is when you start this, people want instant results. It's almost like the American soccer team not doing very well in the the World Championships. Say, why don't we do better? But which leads me to pull on some of my athletic and sports background. The best basketball players in the world are African American. At one time, African Americans weren't allowed to play in the professional and the top leagues. Yet now, without a lot of so-called focused effort, it appears, that all of a sudden we have these great African Americans becoming great basketball players. True, there are tens of thousands who play, so you get 200 that really do well, which is one of the elusive things in this. Is there anything we can learn from the success of African Americans in sports to transfer to the potential success of African Americans in education?
Well, yes. I think the first thing is that experience tells us we do well what we do the most. And I think
number one. It's called in education, it's called time on task.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think number two, young people receive a lot of personal esteem from being involved in sports. If you watch youngsters in the park, they're 3 feet, 4 feet tall, and they're dribbling and they're practicing and out every day trying to do that because they feel a sense of accomplishment. They know that if they stay at it long enough, they will be successful. Well, here's the problem. In school, many of our youngsters don't get their esteem from school. And many of our young people don't believe that they can be successful in school. And that's because I believe we haven't created environments in schools that ensure the success of students. We don't make it possible for young people to be successful. In the park, youngsters knows. He can go to a friend and a friend will show him how to make the move, dribble behind the back, pass the ball. Well, we don't have a lot of that in school. We don't have a lot of people who are willing to make personal investments in the lives of young people to show them how to do it. And I think we've got to change the culture of schools to make that happen. So one thing is we've got to figure out a strategy that helps our young people understand that they can be successful at this. They can do this stuff. And we need to celebrate our youngsters. Here's the other thing that happens. Youngster knows that if I play this game well, I'm going to get a trophy. I'm going to be recognized. I will be celebrated. Well, we don't do a lot of that in school either. I mean, let's be honest. We don't celebrate the achievement unless it's the valedictorian, and that's just one student. Yeah. But the truth is, we really don't celebrate the achievement of our children in school, and we've got to change that. We need to figure out the same way that we value sports, the same way that we recognize the success of young people in that arena, we ought to do in the academic arena. When I was in District 13, I mean, we made it a point of every month we had an activity called Supper with Stars, where we would recognize young people and we would invite them to a dinner where they would receive plaques, trophies, and their parents got up and it was just a big deal. It was a dinner, but we did it for academic improvement. Right? And it wasn't just always for the student at the top. It was also for students who were the most improved, students who made a contribution to the community. And the idea was we wanted young people to begin to associate feeling good when they came to school, because we understood that if a youngster could get some positive self-esteem from that place called school, the likelihood is they would work harder. And we know that if you work hard at something, you will do better.
Well, actually, I had the privilege in my capacity as the director in the Urban Education Policy Center of going to District 13 and going to some of those celebrations. And the one thing that we haven't talked about, which you did very well, parental involvement. Parental involvement is a key, in addition to outstanding teachers and structure. What can be done to get more parental involvement? Because I know the present system, they have a complicated system, parent councils, etc., but it's not working. Parents are not participating, etc. What's the key to parental involvement? You were very good at that in District 13. What's the key?
I think that you have to establish a relationship with the community.
How do you do that?
And when I talked earlier, I said that the administrators often don't have the confidence and trust. Well, confidence, trust, and respect is a two-way street. And I think the school has to have confidence and trust and respect in the community, and the community has to have confidence, trust, and respect in the school. And that's a result of a relationship. And so you got to spend time working on it. We spent lots of time, lots of hours, sitting down with parents, working out this relationship. Parents were real partners in District 13. They were on every team. We had weekend retreats. They were really part of developing the school plan. We didn't just call them in and say, parents, sign it. They were part of the development of it. And the parents also knew that they had a way to influence decisions, because everyone in the district understood that the parents had access to not only the administrators, but they had access to me as the superintendent. They knew that if there was a problem, that problem was going to be addressed. And I think that that's where it starts. At first, it has to start with the relationships, and those relationships have to be based on confidence, trust, and respect, and that has to be mutual. And then from there, here's the interesting thing. We're sometimes very confused about what we mean by parent involvement. See, I don't believe, by the way, my experience is I don't believe parents want to run the school. I think parents want the school to work, and they want the school to be responsive. That's what parents want. I think parents get uptight. I got uptight as a parent if the school is not responsive and if the school my child attended didn't work. So I think what we've got to do is figure out how do we work together to make that happen.
And of course that has to do with structural issues, because the parents are organized in such a way that they can be responded to, and some of their concerns are addressed in a logical fashion, you get more parents involved.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, if you make an arbitrary decision and say that's the way it is, parents will not really be involved. So as we come to the close of the program, If you had to indicate 3 things that you think really need to be done to improve urban education nationwide and in New York City, what would those 3 things be?
Well, I think we need to revamp the way we recruit new teachers and identify school leaders. I mean, I think that has to be done. I think that we should borrow from some lessons that we learned during civil rights and figure out how we can get into middle schools and high schools early to encourage young people to pursue careers in education. I think number 2, we've got to come to grips with this whole issue of resource allocations to schools. I think we need leaders who are prepared to take that bull by the horn and say we are not going to tolerate anything less. And I think we've got to have a real commitment to ensuring that our kids are successful.
And in my opinion, we need more educators like Dr. Lester Young, former superintendent of Community School District 13. This has been a very insightful discussion on urban education. Thanks for being with us today on African American Legends.
Thank you.